The music stopped halfway through my vows. Not faded. Not lowered. Stopped. 1 second the string quartet was breathing life into the chapel. The next, silence snapped tight, sharp enough to make people flinch. Someone gasped. A chair scraped. My groom's fingers tightened around mine, instinctive, protective. Then a voice cut through the quiet. Don't marry her. 2 words. Clear. Controlled. I didn't turn right away. I kept my eyes on the white roses lining the aisle, the ones I'd chosen because they meant new beginnings. Cameras stayed lifted. The officiant froze mid-page. In a room full of people who loved me, no one spoke. That voice belonged to my sister. Mara Cross. Older. Trusted. The one who helped me choose this dress. The one who fixed my veil an hour ago with hands I thought were shaking from emotion. She stepped forward, heels striking marble like punctuation marks. She's lying to you, Mara said, pointing at me, not at my husband, not at the future I was building, but at me. About who she is. About what she's done. About why this wedding is happening at all. The room shifted. I felt it before I heard it. A low murmur spreading from pew to pew. Phones rising. Faces turning, recalculating who I was supposed to be. Behind me, my mother inhaled sharply. My father stood too fast, his chair tipping back. My husband leaned closer, his voice barely there. Elena, what is she talking about? I didn't answer. Before I tell you what my sister accused me of, before I explain why the words landed so hard they cracked the room, let me ask you something. If someone you trusted stood up at your wedding and tried to destroy you, would you defend yourself immediately, or would you stay silent? Because silence wasn't weakness. It was the only reason I survived what came next. I turned slowly and met Mara's eyes. They weren't frantic. They were bright. Focused. Hungry. This wasn't emotion. It was a plan. What no one in that chapel knew, what my sister didn't realize yet, was that this moment wasn't a surprise to me. The whispers. The tension. The sudden confidence in her voice. I had seen it coming. And while Mara believed she was about to expose me, I was standing there with proof that could collapse her entire story. Not in my hands. Not in my purse. But close enough that once the truth surfaced, there would be no way for her to outrun it. Because the accusation Mara made next wasn't just cruel, it was something she'd been preparing for months. Mara didn't hesitate. Once she had the room, she took it. She's been lying about how she met him, she said, nodding toward my husband like he was a prop instead of a person. She didn't tell you the truth about why her last relationship ended. And she definitely didn't tell you about the money. The word money landed harder than anything else. A ripple moved through the guests again, sharper this time. Money meant motive. Money meant scandal. It was the kind of accusation that didn't need details to do damage. My husband turned fully toward me now. I could feel the question in his silence, heavy and unfamiliar. We had promised each other honesty. We had built this relationship on transparency. Mara knew that. She took funds that weren't hers, my sister continued, voice steady, almost rehearsed. Family funds. And when she was confronted, she erased messages, rewrote the story, and played the victim. This wedding. She gestured around the chapel. It's built on a lie. Gasps, no longer subtle. Someone whispered my name. Someone else shook their head. I saw an aunt cover her mouth. I saw a cousin already scrolling, already deciding which version of this story she'd tell later. Here's what no one knew yet. The accusation wasn't new. Mara had been planting it for months. It started quietly, the way most real betrayals do. A comment here. A question there. Are you sure Elena can afford all this? She's always been secretive with money, hasn't she? I'd heard about those conversations secondhand, brushed them off as curiosity, jealousy, nothing worth confronting. I was wrong. 3 months before the wedding, my mother called me late one night. She asked, carefully, if I was stressed about finances. If I needed help. If everything was handled. I told her the truth. That my savings were fine. That my accounts were clean. That I didn't understand why she was asking. She didn't answer right away. Your sister's just worried about you, she said finally. That was the first time I felt it. The faint tilt of the ground beneath me. The sense that a version of me was being discussed in rooms I wasn't in. After that came the messages. Screenshots forwarded to me by friends who didn't know what to think. Conversations I'd never had. Claims I'd never made. A story forming, piece by piece, about an Elena who borrowed, manipulated, hid. Every time I tried to trace it back, the trail blurred. Until I noticed one thing. Every version of the story led back to Mara. Standing there at the altar, listening to her now, I realized something chilling. She wasn't improvising. She was reciting. And the reason she sounded so confident was because she believed she had already convinced everyone who mattered. What Mara didn't know was that the money she accused me of stealing was the very thing that would expose how far she'd gone to control my life. Mara kept talking, but her words began to blur at the edges. Because while she was performing certainty for the room, my mind was already somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere she hadn't considered. The first time money went missing, I didn't notice it at all. It was a reimbursement from a joint family account my parents had set up years earlier, nothing dramatic, nothing urgent. I assumed it was delayed. Banks misplace things. Systems lag. Life moves on. The second time, I noticed. A smaller amount. Withdrawn, then redeposited, then withdrawn again. It left behind a strange echo in the statement, like someone had hesitated mid-theft. When I asked my mother about it, she sounded confused. I thought you moved that, she said. Mara said you were reorganizing things for the wedding. That was the moment the shape of the lie sharpened. I checked my email that night. Found a message sent from my address to my parents weeks earlier. Polite. Efficient. Completely unlike me. It explained the transfers. Reassured them. Closed the loop. I never sent it. I didn't confront Mara. Not then. Instead, I did something she never expected. I stayed quiet and started collecting. Every statement. Every login alert. Every forwarded screenshot. I noticed patterns most people miss when they're busy defending themselves. Access times that didn't match my schedule. Password resets requested while I was asleep. Messages written in a tone that tried too hard to sound like me. It would have been easy to accuse her early. Emotional. Loud. And useless. Because Mara didn't survive on facts. She survived on confusion. So I went where confusion fails. I asked for help. Not from family. Not from friends who still wanted to believe she meant well. From someone whose job was to read silence like evidence. His name was Daniel Reyes. A forensic accountant recommended quietly by a colleague who owed me a favor. We met in a small office that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. I slid the statements across the desk. He didn't react. Just nodded once and said, if someone touched this account without authorization, they left a signature. A week later, he called me back. There's a second device accessing your credentials, he said. Same location. Same network. Consistent over time. I didn't ask whose. I already knew. What shocked me wasn't that Mara had taken money. It was how carefully she'd done it. Small amounts. Just enough to raise suspicion, never enough to trigger alarms. Always paired with messages meant to smooth things over. Always framed as concern. By the time I hung up, my hands weren't shaking. They were steady. Because the accusation she was making now, standing in front of everyone I loved, was resting on a foundation she didn't realize was already cracking. She thought she had rewritten the story. What she didn't know was that I had the original draft. And it was documented. The only question left wasn't whether Mara had sabotaged me, it was when she planned to finish the job. Mara didn't stop after the accusation. She escalated. That was the mistake people like her always make. Once they believe the story is working, they push harder. They want certainty. Control. A clean ending where everyone nods and agrees they were right all along. In the days leading up to the wedding, I saw it happening in real time. My husband started getting messages from people he barely knew. Just looking out for you. You deserve the full truth. Nothing explicit. Just enough to plant doubt. Always framed as concern. Always anonymous. Mara had learned that lesson well. She never accused me directly in private. She let the story travel without her name attached, letting others do the work for her. That way, when it reached him, it felt organic. Earned. The night before the wedding, he finally asked me. Is there something about the money I don't know? His voice wasn't angry. It was careful. That hurt more. I told him the truth. Not the emotional truth, the documented one. I showed him statements. Login alerts. The timestamps Daniel had highlighted. I didn't say Mara's name. I didn't need to. He went quiet, scrolling, reading, piecing it together faster than I expected. When he finally looked up, his expression had shifted. She's trying to corner you, he said. Yes, I replied. And she's going to do it publicly. That was the moment we stopped reacting and started planning. With Daniel's help, I set a boundary I knew Mara couldn't resist crossing. A temporary freeze on the family account, followed by a quiet notice that irregular activity had been flagged. Nothing official. Just enough pressure to force movement. Within hours, a request came through. An attempt to access the account. From the same device. Same network. Daniel documented everything. I forwarded the report to our attorney, Maya Patel, who reviewed it once and asked a single question. Do you want this handled privately, or do you want witnesses? I thought of the chapel. The phones. The way Mara's voice carried when she believed she was untouchable. Witnesses, I said. By the morning of the wedding, everything was in place. Not confrontation. Confirmation. Mara walked into the chapel smiling, confident, convinced she was about to deliver the final blow. She didn't know that the account freeze had already logged her last access attempt. She didn't know that Daniel's report had been timestamped, verified, and shared. Most importantly, she didn't know that the people she believed she was manipulating had already chosen a side. Standing at the altar, listening to her now, I realized something calm and terrifying. Mara thought she was exposing me. In reality, she had walked straight into the space I had prepared for her. And once she finished speaking, there would be no room left for confusion. Because the moment Mara demanded I tell the truth finally got permission to speak, and the room was about to turn. Mara finally stopped talking when she noticed something wasn't happening. No one was rushing to her side. No one was pulling me away. No one was demanding answers from me. The room wasn't reacting the way she'd imagined. She turned toward me again, sharper now. Well, she said. Aren't you going to deny it? Aren't you going to explain where the money went? Every face followed her gaze. This was the moment she had planned for. The pause before my collapse. The silence she believed would read as guilt. I stepped forward slowly, just enough for the microphones to pick up my voice. "I'm not denying anything," I said. A wave of murmurs rolled through the chapel. Mara's lips curved, almost imperceptibly. She thought she'd won. "I'm just waiting," I continued, "for you to finish." That threw her. "Finish what?" she snapped. "Your story." For the first time, her confidence flickered. "You think this is a story," she said loudly. "You think forged emails and missing money are a misunderstanding." "They're not," I replied. "They're evidence." The word landed differently. Before Mara could respond, my husband spoke. Calm. Steady. "Mara," he said, "how did you know about the account freeze?" Her head turned too fast. I didn't," she said. But she had. She'd already slipped. A murmur spread again, but this time it wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. People glancing at each other, replaying moments, recalculating loyalties. I reached into the inner pocket of my gown and pulled out a single envelope. No stack of papers. No dramatics. Just one envelope. "I didn't steal anything," I said. "But someone accessed a family account using my credentials." Repeatedly. From the same device. Over months. Mara laughed, sharp and brittle. "That proves nothing." "It proves pattern," I said. "An intent." I turned slightly toward my parents. "The messages you received didn't come from me." My mother's face drained of color. "What messages?" Mara's breath caught. "Just for a second." "Enough." Amun stepped forward from the side aisle, then Daniel. He hadn't been invited as a guest. He was there as a witness. He held up a folder, unmarked, untheatrical. "Access logs," he said calmly. "IP records. Time stamps." The room shifted. This time, away from Mara. She looked around, searching for support, for outrage, for someone to shout with her. No one did. Her voice rose instead. "You planned this," she accused me. "You trapped me." I met her eyes, steady. "You trapped yourself." Security moved closer, not aggressively. Just enough to be noticed. Mara backed up a step, then another. Her story had nowhere left to go. And for the first time since she stood up, she was the one standing alone. What happened after the ceremony was quieter, and far more final, than anything that happened at the altar. The ceremony didn't end in chaos. That surprised people. There was no shouting, no dramatic removal, no moment that felt made for headlines. What happened instead was quieter, heavier, and impossible to undo. Mara was asked to step outside. Not forced. Not dragged. Just asked, politely, firmly, by two people who no longer believed her. The doors closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than any accusation she'd made. The rest of the ceremony continued in a strange, careful calm. My husband and I finished our vows with voices that didn't shake. The applause afterward was hesitant at first, then real. People stood, not because it was expected, but because something had settled. A truth, finally, with nowhere left to hide. Afterward, there were questions. Not shouted ones. Quiet ones. My parents asked to see the messages. Daniel showed them. My mother sat down when she realized how many times she'd unknowingly defended a lie. My father didn't speak for a long time at all. Mara didn't come to the reception. Instead, she went home, where the consequences were already waiting. Within a week, the family account was formally audited. The access logs were confirmed by a third party. The withdrawals, the mirrored emails, the timing, every piece aligned too cleanly to dismiss. When the attorney filed the report, Mara didn't deny it. She reframed it. She said she'd been helping. That she'd managed things better. That she'd been protecting the family. But protection doesn't require impersonation. And concern doesn't leave a paper trail. The restitution agreement was signed quietly. No court date. No spectacle. Just numbers corrected and access permanently revoked. Mara moved out of my parents' house soon after. Not in anger. In silence. That was the hardest part for her. Silence with witnesses. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. A month later, my husband and I settled into a smaller apartment across town. Nothing fancy. Sunlight in the mornings. Evenings that felt unguarded. The kind of peace you only recognize after living without it. My relationship with my parents changed, slower than I'd hoped, faster than I expected. Trust doesn't reset. It rebuilds. Carefully. As for Mara, I don't know what story she tells now. I know she no longer tells it about me. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: karma isn't loud. It doesn't always arrive in the moment you expect. Sometimes it waits until the truth has enough space to stand on its own. And when it does, it doesn't ask for revenge. It just corrects the record. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought you'd stay silent forever, know this: you don't have to shout. You just have to be ready when the truth finally gets its turn to speak. If this story felt personal, you're not alone. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive loudly, it arrives honestly. Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories like this.